Hey guys, Mike Harris, and just wanted to shoot this quick vid. And this morning I want to talk to you about a word called ego. That's right, ego, E-G-O. Now, the word ego corresponds with a person's ideas of their self-worth, their self-importance. And that is a very important thing because as individuals, we must feel that we are worthy of just even the simplistic part of life. Life is beating some people down so bad that where they have no self-worth, they feel that they're absolutely nothing and nobody. And so the ego is very important. And it is there to help us realize to a degree who we are, our relationship to the workings of the universe, our relationships to God. And if the ego is moderated in the right way, it can empower us to accomplish all the things that God says we can do. Now, the other end of the ego is you hear it a lot of times. They say, well, boy, you got too much ego. And the initial stands for edging God out. And the Bible talks about that in the point that it says sometimes we think more highly of ourselves than we ought to think. And when we do that, we're actually edging God out. We're taking responsibility for things that aren't really ours. We're putting ourselves, we're elevating ourselves because of our own thinking to levels of importance that are not attributable to us. And that's what happens when you edge God out. But this morning, I have a different definition to the word ego. I'm looking at engaging God's order. Engaging God's order. Now, when God stepped out into nothing and created something, he had a divine master plan for everything that he created. I talk about that in some of the teaching sessions I do on the seed, and I help people understand God's plan and why certain things are still in existence now. But under God's order, and when you study God, the theology of God, we find out that there are the three big O's. We find that God is omnipotent, he is omniscient, and he is omnipresent. He's here, he's there, he's everywhere, he's all wise, and he is all knowing. And the other part of this is that since God is that way, that means there's absolutely nowhere we can go, there's nothing we can do, there's nothing we can think that God doesn't already know it before the thought even comes into our mind. He's God, and beside him there is none other. And so a lot of times when we come up with these super wise plans and all this kind of stuff, God already thought it. As a matter of fact, God is the one who has input it within us first, and then it comes to him. It comes from him, then it comes to us. The Bible talks about all good things come from the Lord. So if you're coming up with good plans and all this kind of stuff, well, baby, believe it, it came from God, because if it was yours, you'd already had it. Got it? All right. So when we're engaging God's order, it means we are allowing God to come into every aspect of our life, our mind, our body, our soul, all our spirituality, all our thinkings, all of our victories, all of our defeats, all of our selfishness, all of our egotistical tendencies. It means we're just relinquishing ourselves unto the very master who created us. And when we do that, it says, God, and I trust you, God, I realize who I am, and I know that I'm nothing without you, God. That's why I'm relinquishing all of these things, every aspect of me to you, Lord. I think the song said, Lord, I'm yours, Lord. Everything I am, everything I'm not, everything I have, everything I've got, I'm yours, Lord, completely yours. And this is what engaging God's order is all about. And once we begin to engage God's order, what happens is we find out that God has a pre-established pattern and I found out he has pre-established intersections in my life where when I relinquish total control to him, all of a sudden there are specific doors open up. Well, it's amazing that if I had not relinquished my thinking to him, I'd have been at the wrong place at the wrong time. But because I gave in to God's order, I ended up at the right place at the right time, the right location. Even decisions on finances, decisions on buying things and all this kind of stuff. When I release these things to God and when I allow it to operate under the God's divine order, under God's order, and not mine, it always works out. Even in the midst of the bad things that have happened in my life, when I release it unto God, I found out that if God allowed it, then the bad had to be for some far greater good, because when I went through it, I came out better on the other side of it. So I realized that there's certain things I had to go through in order to get to. Even in the losses, the things that I've lost in my life. Sometimes, when jobs go out, you don't have the money, you lose stuff. Sometimes you make dumb investments, you lose stuff. Sometimes you just lose stuff and there's no exact reason why. But I found out that under God's divine order, when I give into it, did not God tell the children of Israel they wandered in the wilderness because in order for them to get to the promised land, there were certain things in their life, there were certain people in their life that had to die before they entered into the promised land. Do you realize that God has made all these promises unto us, and when we relinquish our self-control, when we relinquish our thinking unto him, we begin to operate under his divine order. And when we're operating under his divine order, there's certain things within us, there's certain patterns, there's certain thinkings, there's certain actions, there's certain habits that have to die in order for us to reach that promise that God has for us. We always say we believe God and we're Holy Ghost filled, fire baptized, I'm this, I'm that, but we allow our ego, thinking more of ourselves. Some of us outthink God. But I'm so glad today that I've learned to engage in God's order. And when you engage in something, that means you're thinking about it. You're thinking about what you're doing. You're thinking about, because I'm engaged in this thing. And I hadn't been forced to. I willingly engaged in it. See, when you are engaging in something, you've made a mental decision that you are going to get in the midst of it. And I've made that mental decision to just engage God's order, because when I do, I found out that God's omniscience, he's everywhere. I found out that God is at the end before I even start at the beginning. His omnipresence, that's his omnipresence. His omniscience is God already thought it before I can think it. When I make an investment and I feel compelled to do that, I found out that it was God leading me, because he's already planted my harvest. And when I've been so weak and just I found out that I got victories even in the midst of loss, because God is all powerful. And all of these things occur because I engage in God's order. And so if you're finding yourself, you've been at this thing a long time, and it still seems like things aren't working out, it's not coming to pass as you felt like God promised, check your ego. Make sure you're not edging God out, but you're engaging in his order. Now, this comes along